Welcome everyone to Solomon's Crown. So today, guys, we're going to talk about a topic that me and Will have been thinking about, and pretty much it goes into the prison system in America. We all, know the horror stories of prisons in America from the inception of this country till now. We have many sad stories, like one that I can think of, um, the Broder case. There's this young man, forgot his first name, but I want to say his last name was Broder. He was walking down the street. He got misidentified by the police for an alleged stolen backpack. He got pretty much accosted, sent to Rikers Island, which is, if anyone knows anything about the East Coast, about New York, Rikers Island is the worst of the worst when it comes down to prisons. It's like hell on earth, kind of. And he was 17 years old, or it was either 16 or 17 years old. He was really young. Don't quote me on the age, but he was really young. Let's just say that he was a young teenager. I think he spent a couple of years there before he even got seen between that time. Because I think stick a pin. I think Jay-Z made a documentary on it. That's the documentary I saw.
Yeah, time
And
and his name is Khalif Broder.
Kevin Broder,
Khalif, like K.
Khalif. So
Yeah,
I apologize for messing up his name. Khalif Broder.
yeah,
Khalif Broder. Yeah. So yeah, he spent a number of years in prison where he was beat up all the time because I think he didn't want to go into gangs or anything like that. He wanted to be
yeah.
his own person. He didn't want to plead guilty because he wasn't guilty. He was innocent, but everyone, they say that everyone says that, and he got brutalized, beat up. Like, I'm talking about things that a young teenager shouldn't experience.
Yeah.
And he got out. He seemed to do well a little bit. Like, he was going back to school trying to get his life together, but the mental damage was already done. And unfortunately, I think a couple years later he committed suicide.
Mhm.
But on a lighter note and a really interesting note, we see that a lot of Nordic countries like Finland, Denmark, Norway, they actually have prisons where the focus is on rehabilitation and not punishment, like in the Americas. Me and Will have been doing some research, and we've seen that in these Nordic countries, 1 out of 3 prisoners go back. They
Yeah,
actually have programs where the prisoners can learn, like go to college and whatnot. The prison guards, they actually go to 2-year college programs and training to de-escalate, self-defense, interpersonal relationships. Even so much so, there was a particular prison in Norway. You sent me that video, Will,
yeah,
where they have they call it dynamic security, where each guard is assigned to like a handful of prisoners, and they actually talk to them like human beings, like build relationships. And I'm talking about, these prisons are almost like Airbnbs almost sometimes, like internet access,
yeah.
like nice comfy beds, and they're treated with human dignity. But not to go too much on it, just to give you a light summary of, like, how it is, how it is or it seems in Nordic countries. And we all know, for people who live in the Americas, and I'm pretty sure in other Western civilizations like in Britain and Canada, we see how America and the West is when it comes on to prisons and criminal punishment. And Will, what do you think of all this? Do you think that ultimately criminals should be punished, or criminals should be rehabilitated to go back into society?
So my beliefs are that prisoners should be rehabilitated. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but to keep these people in prison for life and have no end goal for them, it just seems like it's a kind of a waste. I mean, we've had plenty of documentaries where we've seen prisoners who get their PhDs in prison, who achieve higher learning, and truthfully, the families may say that the the person should stay in jail for life. And I mean, I guess serial killers and people who have like serious mental health issues shouldn't be essentially thrown back into civilization, because at a certain point they are unsavable, and that's
Mhm.
fine. because you have maximum security prisons where people are just legit just crazy. But I mean, there's still also ways to handle that without essentially paralyzing them for the rest of their lives. The biggest thing about people in like Nordic countries and things like that is most of you guys aren't crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They had a run in with something that happened in life, and I mean, even the murderers. I mean, their murderers are different from U.S. murderers. I mean, a lot of people are just killing just because in the U.S. and these Nordic countries. Sometimes it's just murder just happens, but you're tried for murder, and then they they don't change essentially. Like their
Mm-hmm.
mentality isn't like, oh, I'm going to keep murdering and murdering more people if I get out, or they get out of prison. Like we said, they have open prisons. I've seen this like on multiple videos where they have an open prison where the person can just go work a regular job, and then from like 6 to 6 in the morning they have to be in prison. But it helps with the whole rehabilitation because
Mm-hmm.
now they haven't really changed their lifestyles. They're paying for their crimes. They're in jail. They have a lot of freedoms that are taken away from them. But if they are ever rehabilitated, they come back into society as a productive member and not necessarily just a waste of space. The biggest thing about America is a lot of these guys go into prison. They spend what 10 years in prison, maybe sometimes even more, and then they come back out into society and they can't do anything. They can't get jobs. They haven't been in society normally. Like everything for them is like high risk, high like but essentially like when they go into prison they're just like always on edge, and truthfully it's mostly like PTSD,
Yeah.
and that PTSD can be super traumatizing for these people, especially when you come back into society and everybody looks at you like a criminal and that you can do no right, and you're always going to be held accountable for the actions of your past. And I think that that's a horrible way to deal with prisoners in general, because prison isn't meant to be. I mean, if the way you look at prison now is more like slavery, if
Mm-hmm.
anything, I mean, you
It
get
is.
3 square meals a day. You're locked up in a cell. I mean, granted, you have books and everything like that, but it's just not the same because the programs that are made for most prisoners um, may only be in certain prisons. Like, not every prison is the same in the US. Um, you have prisons that are like maximum security where people literally are just criminals and they just keep doing all the drugs and all types of stuff in prison. And we've seen it now where prisoners are even on TikTok at this point. So I
Yeah.
think that the prisons in the US have become a little more lax because we realize that it wasn't helping to just throw these people away and just forget about them. And I'm sure many people have fought for prisoners' rights, and that's why um, they can have cell phones, they can have TVs, like their room living conditions are a little bit better, but that's not every single prison. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these prisons in Nordic countries, even Europe, are more so like if you had a hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to really worry about people killing you and stuff like that. Even the sexual assault stuff that goes on in the American prisons, like it's not really. I mean, even in some of these countries, like you can have your wife, your kids come see you, and it's a chill environment, especially with these open prisons. And I think that's how prison should be because it's a rehabilitation. Um, it's not supposed to be a punishment essentially, and it can be. I mean, it's a punishment enough already that most of your rights have been taken away, and you're living in a cell, you're living in these conditions, but that shouldn't be the end all be all if we want people to come back as productive members of society.
Yeah, so I agree. But just to kind of look at this with the open mind, because I think that a lot of people who may watch this may disagree, and I can kind of see that. Because
Especially
one
the
of the
families of the like the
or the
family,
victims.
yeah, the victims.
So, and we can go into this. I go into this on my vlog. I'm not trying to be a shameless plug, but it's just interesting when it comes down to culture. So I think just to be devil's advocate, you got to look at it from a cultural aspect. Sorry. So these Nordic countries are mostly homogenous. Pretty much Caucasians. They um, everyone is Scandinavian, everyone shares the same culture, they have the same ideals, the same outlook in life and
Mhm.
whatnot, the same culture. I said that already. But in America, everyone is kind of different, right? We have the same culture, but everyone has their subcultures, you know what I mean? So
True.
everyone is look different. And then, we have, America has its checkered past with certain groups of people. So a lot of people would think that, if you steal or if you do XYZ, you should have the book thrown at you. Because you could look at, some other countries like in the Middle East where they have like Sharia law or they have very theocratic like governments, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like, heavily Bible based or heavily or Christian based, I should say,
Religious,
or
yeah,
heavily Islam based. And it's like, yo, if you steal, you're getting your hand chopped off.
yeah.
If you do XYZ, you're getting stoned. Or if you do this, you're getting lashes. So I think maybe because America is heterogeneous and because America has a very heavy Christian influence,
Mhm.
maybe that's where the whole punishment aspect of things come into play, where it's kind of like, oh, like you did the crime, you do the time type deal, but
Yeah, but I
obviously
mean,
that's not working out,
that's not a
yeah,
life sentence. I mean,
yeah,
for those serial killers and like high risk inmates, yeah, who need to
hmm,
be doing life and things like that. But even in the Bible, I mean, you can repent for your sins, and
yeah,
you're not supposed to be punished forever. Like if you commit a crime, then you do what you feel is right. And most of them, I mean, the people who turn themselves in, the people who change their lives around, they come to a point in their lives where they've realized their actions. They've asked for forgiveness from the families, and the families have given them forgiveness, and they've rehabilitated. But
hmm.
even when they're rehabilitated, they most of the time just stay in prison, and they just have to, like, yo, this is my life from here on
This
out.
is life. Yeah, they gotta just
Like, and the thing is
be
like
together. Yeah.
25 to life. Like some dudes actually do 25 years. Like think about the military. Like we do 20 years. Like so 5 more years
So,
on top of that. I mean, people do
mhm.
more than that in the military, and they get out, and I mean
They're
they
old
still have
men,
a
man.
yeah, they still have a whole life ahead of them. But
Yeah.
you keep these guys in prisons where they're constantly on edge, where they're constantly thinking about their lives. And like you said, like this kid didn't want to go into a gang or anything like that. So for him being in prison, it was rough because you sometimes you just don't have a choice.
You have
This
to be in a gang. It's racially
exactly.
divided. You could be the most non-racist person, whether you're white, black, or whatever, but like
You have to choose a side.
you have to choose a side. And that's how the system is. You have to choose a side.
But that goes
But
into
yeah.
like how the system is ran. I mean, these prisons know that there's gangs involved and things like that, and they prep
Mhm.
for it, but they're not necessarily doing anything to stop it. I mean, these dudes hate each other, but I mean, how do we really deal with that when just like, yo, we're gonna have a kumbaya session and like try to get everybody to like
Yeah.
get together? I mean, that makes the
Mhm.
problem situation worse. And then on top of that, like people are killing each other. You still have beef from outside of the prison that
Mhm.
is coming into the prison.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky situation to deal with. I mean, I think that a way that they could start solving it is like literally like doing re-evaluations on people and moving
Mhm.
people to certain prisons who they think can be rehabilitated, and then they get a kind of a second chance. Because I'm a
Mhm.
big firm believer in everybody should have a second chance, no matter what you do in your life, unless it's like malice or ill intent. Like sometimes, like a lot of people are in prison for situations that just like weren't necessarily what they were. But
Mhm.
that goes into another thing with the whole American law and the justice system, and people
Yeah.
being wrongfully accused, and people being tried harder than what they should be because each state is different. So we don't have a federal level of like, we do have a federal level, but not all cases go to the federal level. But there's no baseline for like, okay, murder is how many years? Like we have the old traditional 25 years to life, but I mean, even that seems kind of harsh, depending
Yeah.
on the
Oh,
situation. I mean, you got vehicular manslaughter, like accidents happen, like you accidentally kill somebody, and people still getting 10, 15 years life in
mhm.
prison, and it's just like sometimes it's
And
a
dude,
tricky situation.
people are getting that much for like possession of like narcotics and stuff like that.
Mm,
So it
I
just
mean, but
depends. It depends on the state, but
and the thing is too is like, I
yeah,
mean, I think that's the biggest thing with like why like the marijuana laws haven't been passed federally, because now you have a bunch of people who went into prison for marijuana charges and then marijuana becomes legal. Now, my personal point of view is if you did the crime when it was illegal, then you just got to serve the time. But um, with it becoming federally legal, I mean, you have to look at the cases as they were presented. Like you can't really just be like, oh, these people need to get off because now it's legal because they were breaking the law at the time that the laws were enforced. And I think that's a big problem that people are trying to deal with is like, oh, this guy got put in jail for possession of marijuana. And
mhm,
now you got people selling the same amount of marijuana and driving around with the same marijuana uh, pounds or kilos, whatever they were,
mhm.
and they're running businesses. So
You have a point. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that is a point.
yeah,
But I mean, and it's rough too because as you mentioned, like people get out and they're so institutionalized, and sometimes they just want to go back because they have nothing. Because at least in prison they were getting 3 square meals, they had a bed, they had a quote unquote family, they belonged. But now they're on the outside and they don't know what to do with themselves. And you have ex-con on your resume, on your record, and that's it. You can't vote. Can you even get a passport?
no, if you're a felon, you can't even leave the country.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
So
so I
yeah,
mean that really limits, because truthfully, a lot of these felons could potentially go to other countries and get better jobs. I mean,
yeah,
but I mean that's just, you run the risk of letting a felon in another country where they have more
yeah,
freedoms and they have the potential to get into more gang related stuff. So, or
true.
not even gang related, but drug related stuff. And
Yeah.
truthfully, other countries are ran a lot different than America when it comes to how crime, organized crime is ran. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a different world for damn sure. But there's a lot of things that you can get away with in other countries that you can't necessarily get away with in
In
the
the
U.S.
States.
But if you are a criminal and you just have no options, I mean, you could get a flight out of the country and go to a country that doesn't extradite uh, felons or criminals and just kind of live your life and do what you do. So, I mean, that's always
True.
an option for somebody, and that's based off of the person. So you can't really say that you don't have options. It's just about how you want to live your life. Like, do you want to live your life in America and struggle, or do you want to take the risk and be a criminal to the state and just go live in another country that doesn't care about your past? And they're just kind of like, yo, like you did whatever you did in that other country. And that's the thing, is like a lot of criminals in other countries do that, where they're in
Huh.
countries where they can just kind of start their lives over. And I mean, just yeah, what are you doing here in this country? Oh, I can't go back to America. Like you've heard the stories where people were in countries. It's like, yeah, I can't go back to my homeland. Like I can't go back to
Yeah,
my
I kind of heard something today that some dude, no, I don't even go into that, but
home.
yeah, that's actually a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the emphasis on punishment sometimes is so narrow that it breeds this kind of caste system, right? Like,
Mhm.
and there's an underbelly of or undercurrent rather of capitalism there, and we'll do another part 2 to that, but to this topic. But yeah, like I see these Nordic countries, and granted, the argument could be, they like, we have so much money pumped into the military, we don't have time to put in money into like prison reform and whatnot. But
Mhm.
I've seen some people, like, on the outside, they have businesses that can take in ex-cons. They, I think a lot of
Yeah, but
ex-cons, they do CDL licenses to be a
it's
trucker, which you can
never,
get
I
good
mean,
money.
now is probably the best
Yeah.
time
Yeah,
because
now's
there's
the
a
best
lot of
time. Yeah.
digital businesses. I mean, if you go into IT
Hmm.
is really big for like working from home, not working around
Hmm.
people. You got to think about what these dudes probation say, like what they can
Hmm.
and can't do. Can they work with people? Can they work with children? Um, all types of things. They can't be within
Yeah.
certain meters of this, and
Hmm.
that. And I mean, we can dig more deep into that to see like prisoners who've gotten out and what they can and cannot do as far as
Yeah.
like after you have a felony, after you have a misdemeanor, and things like that. But truthfully, I mean, it definitely comes down to like money too, because
Hmm.
the better your lawyer is, the better you're going to get off on the case, most likely, or your
Very
lower
true.
sentence.
Very true.
Depending on if you're willing to snitch or not, like, are you going to get a lower sentence, this, and that. But the thing about snitching and things like that, like, you have to deal with going into prison, and everybody knows, and
Oh,
that's a big thing too, is like confidentiality, bro. Like,
yeah.
there is no confidentiality
There's
if you're
none.
in like a federal case or any of these cases, because somebody in the prison is going to know, somebody in the prison is talking,
Oh
and
yeah.
a lot of these dudes don't even make it that far. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
the shot
yeah.
callers for the different gangs,
Hmm.
they
Like,
have their ear to the ground and they're gonna find out if you're a snitch. They're gonna find out if you done a particular crime and you are gonna get dealt with based on a
and
lot
think
of
about
the
Takashi
channels
six
I've seen.
nine. Like, the reason why he's survived so long is because he's had the money to survive that long. But think
Yeah.
about somebody who doesn't have the money.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody's been talking about him for months, like, oh, you're gonna get yours, you're gonna get yours. But it's like a lot of the older heads have been talking is like, yo, do you really want to throw your life away for this dude? And I think that a lot of these gang members are starting to realize that, like, this isn't worth it. Like, it's not worth it to throw your life away for something like that, because they've seen how prison can affect them. They've seen how being locked up in the system can affect their lives, especially once
Mhm.
they start having kids, once they start getting things outside of prison that they want to hold on to. And it's a big difference, to be honest. And just to touch bases on like what some of these Nordic countries believe in, just the four topics that we saw from some of the videos was the
Mhm.
principle of normality, focus on humanity, the dynamic security, like you said, where they team up with the prisoners and they kind of rehabilitate them, talk through their
Mhm.
issues and see like what the root cause is, and they actually get
Mhm.
to know them so that these prisoners don't feel like they are alone. And
They play
then
games with them too,
yeah,
like card
exactly.
games, like build a rapport. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is reintegration, because
Mhm.
a lot of these countries believe in rehabilitation and reintegration into normal society so that these people do not show back up into prison. Because, like you said, what is almost 65% of offenders are repeat offenders. Like,
Mhm.
and we
In
talked
the
about
States,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, like U.S. prisons, for every 100,000 people, normally 600 people, 655 people are incarcerated, and compared to a Nordic country, out of 100,000 people, only about 600 or 60 people are incarcerated. So it's almost a like it's
It's
a big difference.
the
Like,
big difference, man.
granted, those countries are a little bit smaller, but even looking at the numbers, like, they have a far, even if you like went to, I mean, you couldn't even do 1,000, because it's like for every 1,000 people, there's still going to be 600.
68.
Yeah,
Yeah.
compared to the number. So they just did a big number because of the population. But truthfully, like, it didn't matter what the number was. America has more people going into prison for crimes and repeating those crimes after they've already gotten out. And
Mhm.
Nordic countries and some other countries are just, all right, man, I did my time. Like, they learn. They just like, I don't want to do that again. Like, and even
Exactly.
though their prisons are better because they get to do a lot more stuff, but
Oh
just
yeah.
the freedoms outside of that. Like, granted, prison isn't going to be fun regardless, especially when you're
Mhm.
obligated to go. But a lot of the prisoners in other countries are just like, yo, I'm good. I have so much to live for, and they actually take the time to think about what they want out of life. But that's another thing too, is like they don't have to deal with all the crime that is happening in prison, the
Mhm.
hostilities that are happening in prisons. I mean, that
Stress.
dude
Yeah.
who we looked up, he went to an open prison,
Mhm.
and there was what, maybe like 100 other dudes there, but none of them. Everybody is on their own thing. Like, everybody is doing their own projects, their own types of rehabilitation. They have schools and studies, and they have jobs sometimes. Like,
Mhm.
it's a big difference on the rehabilitation, but America's so big and so fast that we can't really focus all this money into that. I mean, but that's the thing too, is like, it's a give and take. Most of these smaller countries can focus on that because that's what they want to make their civilization better. And then America is just on making money, capitalism.
Yeah.
There's more things to worry about besides prisoners and people who are deciding to mess up their lives. And
Mhm.
that's the thing too, is like when it goes into like how different governments respond to their people, and it's just so much more that goes into it. Like this is the base uh, surface of the issue, but people are constantly working to make prisoners' lives a lot better, and it's just going on deaf ears for the most part, and nobody wants to pay for it.
But
The
just
biggest, no, go
just
ahead.
oh sorry, man. But to just play devil's advocate, is it really worth it? Like, is there really worth in people, they mess up or whatever? Like, say, I don't know, the one or two out of every 50 person that messed up their lives that, they didn't pay much attention in school, they sat on the corner, they were lazy or whatever, and then they went to prison,
Mhm.
they got caught up with whatever situation. Is it really worth it, I guess, from an economy standpoint, to put money into prisons and rehabilitate them as opposed to just, putting them in
For
prison, locking the door and throwing away the key?
So that goes into like the other talk that we talked about where we haven't had that one yet, but we'll have it. But just a sneak peek, where the way that we are raised in America versus the way that other countries are raised when it comes to just
Hmm.
schooling alone,
Yeah.
the school systems in other countries are so much further ahead of America that even the like some of the dumbest people in other countries, and I'm not trying to say it is like there's a lot of dumb people out there in America, but for the most part, like most people will get by in schools in other countries and still have a base level of education that's higher than most Americans. And that's by the age, by 10th grade, essentially. Like if you're a
Hmm.
kid in, let's just say Europe, and by the time you're in 10th grade, like you're if you can do decently in class, you're probably smarter or at least know a lot more information than most high school seniors in America, and even I would go
Facts.
to say like freshmen in college,
Facts.
because they harp on that. Like the training for everything else in all these other countries, like you said, the security guards in prisons, they go to school for 2 years just to be a prison guard. And what you could probably become a correctional officer or a prison guard in a prison in the US in maybe like 6, 7 months, like under a year for the
No
most.
way. We lower probably.
Exactly. Like they
Yeah.
probably just be like, yo, you used to be a mall cop, bet. Like,
Do the
yo,
CBT real quick.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that gets into the bigger picture of like the differences between the US and other countries and how
Mhm.
they focus on proficiency and not just quality or quantity,
Mhm.
because quality over quantity when it comes down to most jobs. I mean, we have a lot of jobs in America too that are just throwaway jobs, essentially. Like anybody can do them. It's just a way for people to get the money out of their business into other people's hands so they don't have to pay taxes or whatever they have
Mhm.
to do. And that's why, like we said before, like a lot of these American companies are trying to pull people from other countries because they
Yeah.
can rely on these people to get the job done. Because if
Mhm.
somebody says like, yo, I was a cop in Europe, they probably have more training than most cops in America, or at
Yeah.
least the cop, they're probably the same level as a cop who's been doing this for 10, 15 years. And that's crazy because they spend like 3, 4 years becoming a cop. It's not just, hey man, you made it through the academy. Like, I mean, think about basic training, bro. Like most people can make it through basic training,
Oh yeah.
and you just have a general knowledge of what needs to be done. And then as you progress through the military, you learn a lot more. And it usually, I'd say like 5, 6 years in, that's when you're kind of like,
You're
okay, I know what
solid.
I'm
Yeah.
doing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But think about it, like, do we really have time in America to put somebody through 6 years of training and not have them working on the aircraft or have them be in security forces or things like that? Like a lot of
Mhm.
America is OJT. And
That's
granted,
actually true when you put it that way. Yeah.
like, I mean, everything almost like they'll hire somebody even at McDonald's. Think about how McDonald's is in Japan
Mhm.
compared to like the US. Like people who like, how many times has your food been messed up in Japan?
Never,
At McDonald's,
ever.
bro. Like even at McDonald's, bro. How many times has it been like, yo, our ice cream machine isn't working?
Burger,
Like,
yeah.
bro, like it's a different world. Like, because even the person at the lowest, bus driver, doorman, they value their job and they take the time and they put it into it. They put the hard work into it, and that's a
Mhm.
big difference, man. Like, so as far as like the prison system, like we all know that the prison system is not designed to rehabilitate people
Oh, not at all.
at
Yeah.
all. And it does come down to like what you said, is like, is it even worth putting the time and money into when a lot of these people are just not going to take what is given to them and turn their lives around or be productive members of society. And the thing is it's not everybody in prison who's like that. A lot of people have to suffer for the mistakes and the I don't care about life type thing of
Mhm.
everybody else. I mean, one bad apple, as they say,
Yeah.
and ruin the whole batch. So
So, just to give my final thoughts on this particular topic, it's just mind blowing to me that they have countries where people can actually go, they can think on their mistakes, but at the same time, they're still treated with dignity. Excuse me, they're still treated with dignity. They're given a chance to learn for free, and then they can come out and they become a productive member of society. Whereas in America, people go in there innocent, they make a simple mistake, either a dumb mistake, or sometimes they're completely innocent and it's wrong, imprisonment, and they're messed up for life.
well, that's the thing too, is
But
like
I
you can still
okay,
be charged for doing stuff
mm-hmm,
in prison. Like, say, like you have somebody, like you have to kill somebody in prison, like, or like just
yeah,
somebody accidentally dies in prison and you're framed for it, or
mm-hmm,
and like you can still get more years in
time,
prison.
yeah,
So like even the part of being in prison isn't the end game. You still have to be on your best behavior while everybody else is cutting up in there.
you can't even necessarily be on your best behavior because if you are a part of a group and the shot caller says, "Hey, a
Yeah.
riot's gonna happen at X time," or "Hey, you gotta shank this person," you got to do it, or else you're gonna be the one getting shanked.
Yeah, and it's a
But
product of
just
your environment. I mean, that's the
yeah,
environment that they're building in these prisons.
hmm but just to go back to what I was saying, yeah, I think the stark differences are there.
Hmm.
I totally am more on the side of outside of heinous, like serious crimes. If you made a mistake, did something wrong, like rehabilitation is the way to go because I think people are the ultimate and the best resource for an organization, for a country, for a group of people. But I think ultimately, I don't think it would work in America because I think the culture would have to change first. It's the
Well, not to
culture that
mention
breeds this.
all
Yeah.
the prisons are full for the most part from what they talk
Yeah.
about. So it's like you can't even separate petty crime guys from like third degree murder, like felons. So it's
Yeah.
like you got a dude in there with three misdemeanors who's just like chilling with the killer. Like, and
Yeah.
that's the
Exactly.
biggest thing too, is like those prisons should be separated. Like, if
Mhm.
anything, build another prison right next door. But I mean, it takes money to build a prison. You got to have guards, you got to have like cooking staff. Like, it's a lot of money to build a prison and to maintain a prison.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like people, they barely can keep prisons fully staffed as is. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, people just get tired of it too, because it's also a high stress area. You're, even as the guards, you have to worry about like, is there going to be a riot today where I lose my life? Like,
Hmm. Exactly.
in these prisons, I
Exactly.
mean, you can look at the prisons in these other countries, and the guards are just like, "Yo, I love my job. Like, this is the best thing I could be doing for society." And
Yeah.
it's that different.
It's cool. It's interesting, but it's a wild at the same time. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. We could definitely have some rehabilitation on this side of the waters, but I think there's gonna be a lot of soul searching within the society for that to even be a thing, really. Granted, there are programs that, I think that prisoners can get into to kind of help themselves. They have the library, the law library, where they can learn stuff. There's some prisons, I believe, that have extracurriculars that they can, get a degree and whatnot. But
Mhm.
for the most part, man, this prisons are like a meat grinder, man, in the US. compared to the Nordic countries. But that's all I have on my side of things. Do you have any final thoughts on this, Will?
No, I mean, I had watched a couple videos on like the prison systems, like just, browsing on YouTube. And I had seen the same video that you told me about where the dude is just like, he just lives in an open prison. So I think the biggest takeaway from here is just like what can be done to kind of start rehabilitating American prisons to be more so to reintegrate prisoners into society and not necessarily make them throwaways. Because if the goal is to make sure that people are not repeat offenders, then you have to give them the means to be better and not necessarily throw them into situations that gives them no other options but to be what they're going to be. So
All right, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? I want to know in the comment sections below. But and if you guys, you're here so far, you like what you're listening to, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because it goes a long way in helping our little channel grow. But anyways, guys, I'm your boy Pop,
boy, Willie, man,
and we will see you in the next one.
peace.
Peace.